Hi,
ladies.
Vanessa.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Nice to see you both. You both look amazing.
Well, Nikita, hurry up. Sit down. Being rude to our
Is she?
guests.
Sorry.
Is she?
Hi,
Hi,
Becky. How are
Nikita.
you?
I'm good. How are
You're
you?
beautiful. Actually,
Oh, thank you.
let me turn this music down. I can't hear you. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Toast Profesh here. Okay, so hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, ladies. How are you both?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. You're our official first guest.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, I mean, Courtney
That's
was on
fun.
last week, but she doesn't count because she's family. You know, but actually,
Yeah.
you're family, really, aren't you? Like, I've known you for long
She's
enough
like
to be
a
family.
she's like a sister, and I'm like a cousin.
Yeah. So for all of you who don't know who are watching, Becky's brother was my old flatmate. So it's
Yeah.
very. But how I've known you since you were how old?
So we met when I was 16. Yeah, so I was 16 turning 17, and I just moved to Sydney from the country, and I started going out in the scene. And Vanity, you were one of the first people I saw. And as a young, I guess, curious young child, I was in awe by you, and you're amazing. And I think that for me, that's when I started kind of questioning my own gender identity. And I was like, oh, so they're doing drag, but they look like women. Like, I was like, oh, that means I can do that too. So I remember I started doing drag. And I remember you actually did my makeup for me, and so did Courtney. And I
Yeah.
remember I did Disco Medic for quite a
You worked
while.
for Courtney for Courtney's business. It's Fresh
I was
Australia.
I was Courtney's employee before she was famous.
Courtney had a business called Fresh Australia or Australia Fresh or something like that. In like 2000 maybe or 2001.
Yeah, we called it Disco Medic.
Yeah.
So it had like lollipops and fans and all sorts of things. And we used to go to parties like Queer Nation, and all these people would come up chewing their faces off, and would sell them fans and lollipops and all sorts of things like that.
Oh, that's really cool. That's actually really smart.
That Courtney would just buy from 7-Eleven and then like just triple the price.
Yeah, pretty much.
Entrepreneur.
It was like $5 for some extra.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Gavin did it once. I think he just took all the money.
Probably. That's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get sheepies to do work for you.
No. So yeah, so I started doing drag, and that was really, really fun. But I started realizing things when the party would be over, the recovery would be over, and I still didn't want to get out of drag. I wanted to stay in drag, and I was like, this isn't probably the right thing for someone that's a drag queen as such to want to not get out of drag. And so, yeah, pretty much from there, that was when I decided that I wanted to go to a GP about that. And I spoke to them about my gender identity, and I went to an endocrinologist, and I started on hormones when I was about 18, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about 18. And then it was hard then, I think, because there wasn't really much of a scene, as in like for the trans community. There was a few trans people in the scene. And Vanity, as you would probably recall, that there probably weren't the best role models for people to look up to be, oh, I want to be just like her. So we're not going to mention any names, but we know who we're talking about.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I think for me, I kind of had to pave my own way, and I wanted to make sure that I kept working. I was hairdressing at the time, so I kept doing my apprenticeship, and I didn't want to fall into, I guess, I'm going to call it the lifestyle that was, I guess, known for being associated with being trans, and that wasn't really something that was for me. I mean, it is for some people, and that's what they do. But I guess for me, that wasn't the road that I wanted to take.
Yeah.
And then yeah. So I moved to London when I was 21, and then that was how I went through the process to have gender affirmation surgery. So I had my surgery done. In London, and I actually remember I met up with Courtney not long after I had my surgery done, and I won't use the words that she said to me when she messaged me, and she goes, rumor has it that you've had blah blah blah. And yeah, so we ended up catching up, and I saw her in London after I had my surgery done. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time because there was a lot of, I guess, people doing drag in a feminine way, but they maybe potentially were a little bit confused as to whether they were trans or whether they weren't trans. And I think I questioned that as well. But I looked back on my like history in my life, and I was never really comfortable with being a boy. And even though I was doing drag and I guess in a sense living as a gay young man at the time, I wasn't really comfortable with being gay. So yeah. And yeah, that's kind of how my journey kind of started. And that's,
I mean, if I can get there, that is like, I remember the moment when I first saw you after your transition, and the difference in just your aura and your energy was so incredible. And I was like, oh my God, of course. Like, of course, this is like, this is perfect. It made it like, I could absolutely see without a doubt, the difference in just your, like your soul sort of just blossoming from finally being your authentic self.
Yeah. And I think it was very different at the time. When I first started my transition, I was like 18, 19. This is in around 2002, 2003, around that time. And there wasn't Laverne Cox, there wasn't Monroe Bergdorf, there wasn't all these trans activists at the time. There wasn't a trans revolution until about 5 years ago. And so for the people like myself and a few other girls that I knew at the time, we only really had each other. There wasn't an external scene. There wasn't Facebook. There wasn't social media to connect with these other people. So in Sydney, we had to pave our own way in a sense. And the only kind of people we knew of were the showgirls from Les Girls and things like that. And for me, I didn't want to be a showgirl. I can't dance or sing or perform whatsoever. But yeah, I just wanted to live, I guess, inverted brackets, a normal life and be a woman. And I think what we kind of taught at the time is if you transitioned, you had to be stealth. You had to blend into society. You weren't meant to tell people you were trans, because if people knew you were trans, then you weren't good enough at being trans, basically, because you needed to blend in. And I think for me that took a big toll on, I guess, my self-esteem and my self-worth. And it probably wasn't until the trans revolution, if you want to call it that I started being more kind of open about myself publicly. And it was hard. Yeah, it was a hard place to be. To it's almost like a second coming out. You've come out as trans. You've transitioned to be a woman. You've then living stealth in the community, and then you have to get to a point where you're okay. So now I have to be comfortable to be proudly trans. Yeah.
So how long did that? What was that like? I want to ask you, like, what was it like living stealth and having that shadow over you all the time? I mean,
it was very.
You're beautiful and you're very passable. You know what I mean? Like, you're unspring girl, but even still, you're still, you know, you're still living stealth.
Yeah. So I think there's kind of, in my mind and from my opinion, there's two kind of different areas of people that are trans. There's people that do pass in public and that, you know, are seen as being stealth, etc. And that's good in some ways, that you don't get the public ridicule that people that are visibly trans, I guess, if you want to call it that, you know, they're the ones that get assaulted in public. They're the people that get yelled at on the bus and that kind of, but at the same time, the silver lining to that is they also don't have to come out to people about being trans. So for someone that's stealth, it's on your shoulders to tell people you're trans if and when you want to. Yeah. And at the time, it was quite difficult with work, like getting, like not to get employment, but to keep that secret while you're employed. Men is a whole different story. So that's a whole other. And I got myself into some difficult / dangerous situations with men. Yeah. So I think I had to come to the realization that I needed to start being. Yes, I was pretty. Yes, I passed as a woman, but I had to start accepting myself. I'm still a woman, but I'm a woman of transgender experience, and I needed to embrace that as opposed to trying to hide it.
It's a really interesting term. That's a really cool term. A woman of transgender experience.
Yeah.
I think, the thing is, it's funny because, yes, I have a trans identity, but I don't label myself necessarily as a trans woman. It's like saying someone's a disabled person or a homeless person. You're putting the label before the person. So by saying by saying you're a woman of trans experience, yes, I've got that history, but I am a woman first and foremost.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
That's really cool.
That is interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that.
Neither had I.
Yeah. That's why it's so nice to talk to someone who has that experience. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we know.
Yeah. What was it like for you girls, I guess, during the time, I guess, when we all kind of, like, Vanity, when you and I knew each other when we were younger, and going through that, I guess, that time of indecisiveness of, do I just enjoy doing drag? Am I a trans woman? Like, how do I identify? What was that like for you?
Well, for me, it was look, early on, before we met each other, actually, when I was 18 or 19, it was really confusing and really hard. But I think I realized, I always knew early on that I was not trans. Like, I knew that I wasn't a woman. Like, I wasn't born in the wrong body, but I also wasn't born in the right body either. Like, I wasn't born in the, that's the wrong word. I find it really difficult to explain without sort of, without getting the words right. But it took me
you don't have to tiptoe around me. It's okay.
Yeah, no. It took me a long time to accept the fact that I am allowed just to be me, and regardless of where I fall within that spectrum, the spectrum's irrelevant. It's all about how I feel personally. And it's okay for me to wear girls' clothes as a boy. It's okay for me to be in drag and love it. It's okay for me to not wear drag and love it. That's who I am, and that's my experience. But at the time, it was actually really uncomfortable because I was so awkward and so unsure of myself as a boy. And also because I was like this fabulous drag queen that people I just didn't feel like I could compare. My own identity could compare to Vanity's identity. So
I
got lost under it, and it took over because I was so sort of self-conscious and my self-esteem was so low. So I found myself depending on drag to get through life because I didn't feel like being myself was okay. And even like in the gay scene, like we were made to feel shame, like about how we felt, and like the fact that we weren't the stereotypical gay men, and even the stereotypical drag queens. Even the drag queens gave us a hard time because we were like, you're too feminine. And I remember, and I'm not going to use the word, but the T word. I remember a drag queen telling me, if you want to then take hormones and go work on William Street and be a prostitute because that's what they do. You know what I mean? I remember that's what they said to me when I was a baby. And so to do that from my superiors was really hard, and it really affected my self-esteem and my soul because, like, I was like, well, that's not who I am, but you're putting me in a box. You're defining me. And I was never given the chance to define myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I remember when I first made the decision to want to take that step to take hormones, to start to transition, with kind of like with how Courtney's your little sister, and it was very similar with trans women, and I had an older sister who I looked up to, and she'd already started transitioning, taking hormones. I was still doing drag at the time, and I said I want to go through this process, and I remember her distinctly saying to me, be sure that you want to do this, because if you decide to do this, it's going to be a very lonely life for you. And like she was talking from her own experience, and this is someone I looked up to. Yeah. And despite her saying that to me, I was like, you know what? Maybe it is for you, but that's not the way it's going to be for me.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought to myself at the time. And yeah, I think you really have to kind of own your identity, no matter whether you're gay, straight, trans, whether you do drag, whether you're a masculine man, whether you're a feminine man, no matter what, you have to own your own identity.
Exactly.
And 2020 is a place to do it. Like, we're lucky. I wish that I was, coming of age
growing
now.
up. Yeah.
Because the options that are available now, we didn't have
the terminology.
20 years
we
ago,
didn't even have the word gender fluid. Like, that wasn't even a thing that existed. You know what I mean?
It wasn't.
Like, a woman of trans experience wasn't a word that existed. It was another. It was an, you know, it's just it's a different time, and we're very fortunate that we live in these times now. But it's people like us that have worked hard to get this far.
It's true. It's very true. And I even remember when I first transitioned, the word transgender wasn't even an option then. It was transsexual. That was it.
Yeah, of course.
You're a transsexual. Yeah, or the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, we've definitely come a long way, and I think it's great to have young people that can now identify and be themselves and not have that fear that or the isolation that we might have experienced during that time. And yeah, I think we've come a really long way.
I think so. But Becky, tell us about what you do for a job.
So up until recently, I was working for a company that they support people in the LGBTIQA plus community that have disabilities and barriers to employment. And my job was to support other trans women that were, I guess, struggling to get into work, or they might have wanted to transition at work. And I also went to employers and did like trans and gender diverse awareness training at their places of work. So there, for example, there might have been someone said, look, we've got this person, they want to transition at work, can you help us? And I would go to that place of work and I would say, look, these are the steps you need to take in order to support this person in the right way.
Yeah.
So I did that for a really long time, and now I'm working with people experiencing homelessness. So I work in like a rapid housing program supporting people to be housed. And it's interesting during this time because we're going through, you know, everyone's got to self-isolate and be at home and do those things. But the people I'm currently supporting, they don't have a home to go to. So where are they meant to be? So I think being in the work that I'm in has really grounded me, and people will often say, oh, it must have been so hard for you to come out and be trans, and say, yeah, it was a challenge, but I'm also very privileged. I'm in a good place in my life. I've got a roof over my head. I'm not in an abusive relationship and things like that. So I think being in that type of work really grounds you, even though you've had struggles of your own.
Yeah. I think doing selfless work is really important and a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, you guys were having so much fun, and I've made it all deep and.
No, that's exactly what we wanted to talk about. Like, like it's gonna be deep. It's a deep conversation. It's a deep topic. You know what I mean? It has so much depth to it, and this is why, like, you know, both of us were nervous about it. Like, at first, we're like, yeah, let's talk about this and let's get Becky on, and we're like, oh, actually, like, there's a lot to think about when it comes to this subject, because it's so diverse and so diverse and so vast. But no, I think it's good. I think it's good. The more we talk about this sort of stuff, the more people, and ultimately, I would love people out there listening who are feeling the same way, who are unsure or don't have, you know, who can just hear another story and help them with their story. That's what I would love people to get out of this.
I think the really great thing about doing this as well today is that there's always kind of been a bit of a divide between the drag community and the trans community, but history speaking for itself is that trans women were often showgirls and showgirls were often trans women and vice versa. And there's still actually a lot of transgender women that do drag, that like to get dressed up and they have a drag persona in themselves. And even, you know, with the experiences of that very famous drag queen in America and her segregation towards trans women being in her very famous show. I don't know how much I'm meant to say about names, so I'm not, but we all know who I'm talking about.
Fine, it's perfect, we all know. Yeah.
But I think it's
the thing about drag is it's not gender specific.
No. And I remember coming up to Mardi Gras this year. I hadn't been to Mardi Gras for like 10 years. I had this fear of coming to Mardi Gras. I don't know why, but I thought, you know, I've established myself as a demure lady, and if I go to Mardi Gras, I'll get trashed and up on the floor, so, which I do. But I remember I wanted to wear a costume and I wanted to wear a wig, and I remember having this insecurity going, oh, but if are people going to think that I'm a drag queen? Even though I thought, you know what? Who gives a fuck if they think I'm a drag queen? Yeah. If they think I'm a drag queen, great. If they think I'm a fabulous woman dressed up in a wig, great. And you know what? I had the best time, and I think for me that was a huge milestone to be able to somewhat come full circle and, in a sense, be in a costume similar to drag and just to embrace it and own it. And I think it's really important that if you want to do it, then do it.
Do it. That's the message in life. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just fucking
And
do it.
Vanity, you're gonna hate me. My wig that I wore to Mardi Gras that I bought for $50 on the internet, and then I styled it all myself, and I crimped it all and boiled it and did all sorts of things, sewed more hair into it. But I had the front covered, so you couldn't see how tragic the hairline was. But you might not have noticed that.
It was amazing. It was
Darling,
so cool.
I was at your brother's house and I saw that wig. I even put it on.
Did you?
And it was rotted. I was like,
well, you know,
why didn't you call me?
I know. Next time I will for sure. But the thing was, because I knew I wanted to braid it and boil it, I thought if I bought one of your wigs and then I did that to it and then it comes out and it's like all melted, I'm like, fuck, what do I do now? That's why I wanted to experiment with a $50 wig first.
No, it's fine. It's all good. All right, Becky, it was lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Nice chatting to you, both.
And we hope you stay in your isolation. And lots of love.
Thank you, ladies. Enjoy the champagne.
We will.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Oh, no, stop. We don't end it. Oh, we don't end the chat. We just want to end it. Okay, okay, good. Okay, we're good.
I can't open it.
Oh my God, okay. Oh, that was heavy, wasn't it? That was nice.
That was heavy, but that was really nice.
She's such an inspiration. Like, every time I see her on like her stuff, and I just find it so inspiring. She's just such a selfless person. It's something we can all take note of, you know.
What?
No, nothing.